57, well, episode 57, attempt 2 of Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host, Dusty O'Connell, and I'm here with our regular co-host and analyst, the editor-in-chief of Vikings Territory, senior writer for Vikings Journal, and a contributor to the Daily Norseman. He's Arif Hassan. How are you, Arif?
I'm good. How are you, Dusty?
A little nervous. I'm not accustomed to being live on YouTube. Some very famous people have been live on YouTube before, including Lord and Fred, and I am not nearly as famous or influential as either of those people.
We would not dare to put ourselves in such elite company.
I know. Fred left us all big shoes to fill. But yeah, no, due to, the long and short of it is my computer is as, disappointing this season as Matt Khalil is. And much like him, it decided that it just was not going to give 4 quarters of performance to me after editing the show during the editing of the show last week, which, you came up with this, and I think there might be something to it. I think the common thread here is Justice Mosqueda, our guest from last week, ruining all of our attempts at doing Green Bay shows, which is really an insidious trick, given that we try to have him on for the rivalry games.
Yeah, I don't want to say like we're doing him a favor as if he owes something, but we're like extending generosity to him, and he responds by ruining our shows. That's I think that's 6 total hours he's wiped out now.
Well, and the worst part of it is like the first time he holds the current record of episodes guested that have not posted at 2, and I believe he is like double lapping the field. I don't think we've ever had this problem necessarily with anybody else, but no, he's not only the first time it was just recording problems and we were able to like get back to it next week, but this time like my computer can no longer like edit and post-process audio, which is partly a failure of my old Mac Khalil-esque computer. It's really and it's the same sort of thing. I don't know if it's confidence issues or what, but it just doesn't have the punch that it had its rookie season, and we're trying to figure out why. We're trying to install some solutions, but they're slower coming than we would like. I will say this though, I gave my computer a lot of shit, and it still didn't try to knock off my hat. So at least it displays some measure of good sportsmanship.
In its defense. So about like the Matt Khalil knocking the hat off a fan thing. So for a while, like the story was, can we? First, everyone's like, can we confirm did this happen? Did this happen? And then the person, ended up contacting a couple of reporters, I think from like ESPN, Star Tribune, and 1500. And then like Deadspin acquired a video because that's what Deadspin does. And so, for a while the story was, man, I can't believe Matt Khalil did that. That's kind of annoying. Instead of like, wow, that's so incredibly mature. That's ridiculous. I can't believe Matt Khalil did that. It was just like, yeah, that's kind of weird. And that was like kind of a weird take because, in the football world we tend to like hot takes and identifying player behavior mistakes and talk about their maturity and stuff like that. And that I actually thought was like a legitimate area to do that because, he's a professional. He needs to exhibit professional behavior in the light of fans being jackasses. And make no mistake, this fan was being a jackass. But then the conversation turned entirely to how much of a jackass this guy is because people found his Twitter account because, again, he contacted, ESPN and the Star Tribune. So it was easy to find his Twitter account because he was using it to talk about the story.
Yeah, but he was like shopping around.
Yeah, right. And so the conclusion to the story is this guy's a douchebag, and he's lucky he didn't get punched in the face because not only does he look like a douchebag, he acts like a douchebag. And then people are like sharing stories about him, like I was behind him in line at Chipotle once, or rather I was ahead of him, but it turned out he thought otherwise, and stuff like that. Right?
No.
And so
this has not gone as well for him as he has maybe initially intended.
Right, exactly. And so now it's just like, man, we all have a lot of sympathy for Matt Khalil, but like, don't do that again.
I think you make an interesting point. Like, how different would this story have ended for everybody if it had been RG3 and not Matt Khalil doing that?
Oh, I mean, extraordinarily different because, well, first, I mean, Matt Cluel's not a quarterback, right? So you
So you're
can't.
leaving aside that, well, I guess not leaving aside, but yeah, there's the whole leadership angle. You can't have, the star franchise player, your, big representative knocking the hats off of people's heads, even if they are, giant douchebags who cut in line at Chipotle.
Yeah, but also like RG3 is suffering from like kind of a Vince Young problem, and the difference, of course, is that Vince Young was good while his coach was systematically destroying him, and RG3 is not, so you don't have as much sympathy for his coach systematically destroying him because he's bad, and so you don't feel as much sympathy for RG3, and I get that, and then also he made one comment one time about how really good quarterbacks don't need a team in order to win. And this is amidst a sandwich of all of these comments about how he messed up, how he screwed up, how all the sacks were on him, how he was really bad at his job. And, he made a bunch of statements about how everything was his fault. And then after he made that statement about how, everybody has to play well, he said, everybody has to play well. That includes me. I let my team down. So all of that is sort of left out, and just this thing about how really good quarterbacks have really good teams became the focus. And yeah, I guess you don't want your quarterback to say that, but like for me, I just kind of like begrudge. Like, I mean, is he wrong? His team is shitty, right?
Well, and that became
And
like that was the hot take. Like, oh, RG3 throws shade on his whole team during press conference, and it's like, well, that's really, not even a little what happened.
right?
But hey, that fits the narrative of RG3 coming in and like you said, having the Vince Young problem and being systematically screwed over by his organization and set up to fail, and also not being very good while he did it.
Yeah,
And
so that's the one thing that makes it different than Vince Young, because Vince Young was like dealing, like he wasn't like a top 10 quarterback, but he was definitely better than anybody Jeff Fisher tried to replace him with. That's just true. Like in adjusted net yards per attempt, including running, which is kind of an important part of Vince Young's game at the time, passer rating, QB wins, if that was important. Like he was better than all these, and Jeff Fisher was like, I'd rather have Kerry Collins.
but Kerry Collins is the voice of experience or something.
Right? They even tried Rusty Smith once. Like now you're just doing this on purpose.
That's just desperation. Well, so this is probably the only opportunity we'll have to bring up RG3 in the context of this show, unless we, shoehorn in another one at some point. But how does this affect our previous statements and beliefs on Colt McCoy? Like, did he fall ass backwards into being Colt 45?
A little bit. I mean, okay, so the thing people keep talking about, of course, is how he is the only quarterback for the Washington team to both to start and finish a game and win the game, which is like a really convoluted version of QB wins, right? Like it's not just counting wins; it's adding a condition like don't get arbitrarily benched or injured. Because the other two quarterbacks on the roster also have a win, right? Because they're like 3-8, and so now Colt McCoy has an opportunity to lose 4 more games in a row and have everyone on the roster be 1-4. And I look forward to that. I kind of want that to happen, just because it would be kind of a fun way to deal with takes and stuff. But I mean. So, obviously Robert Griffin III is having a pretty awful year, right? There's no question about that. It's also really hard to believe that Colt McCoy is better, right? So, RG3 is averaging 4.6 adjusted net yards per attempt, 5.3 net yards per attempt. And Colt McCoy, in his career, has matched that exactly. So it's like very difficult for you to just be like, well, yeah, Colt McCoy is obviously better, right?
Well, so do you think? Well, but that's the Colt 45 question. I guess I didn't do a very good job asking it. Do you think if Colt McCoy performs better, does that make the takes hotter in the offseason? Or if he ends up flatlining just as much as every other Redskins quarterback has, then do we go back and send Robert Griffin and an apology card saying, yeah, maybe you were just playing on a really bad team with really bad coaching and really bad ownership.
No, because quarterbacks aren't supposed to act like that, right?
I mean,
You can't be like,
they're just supposed to be good independently of their teams, I suppose.
well, they're not supposed to blame their team when their team sucks. That's the whole hot take with Robert Griffin, which I understand, but I mean, like, if you can't allow quarterbacks like one sentence of frustration in like a 17-week season, you know?
Well, and there's a difference between actually being a bitter complainer and pulling like a LeGarrette Blunt, and just walking off the field because you're bored and you feel like the team is misusing you, and
Right.
defending. Well, and I mean RG3 is like out there trying to defend himself not only from every defensive lineman on every team, but also like every sports writer and their screaming hot takes. Like that's a tough needle to thread.
Absolutely. It's I don't know, man. It's just the problem is just Washington. Anytime you have to deal with being, the Washington team.
I would laugh so hard if RG3 ended up in St. Louis.
That would be so funny, especially especially because that would actually make the Vince Young analogy complete.
It really would.
Yeah.
And Washington would end up getting like 6 players or something out of the deal.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful.
St. Louis would have 2 quarterbacks and 0 knees between them. Would be.
I'm actually surprised that they moved on from Austin Davis to Sean Hill. I mean, it helps Kenny Britt's fantasy points, but other than
that. Yeah, well, Sean Hill, really?
Right, and like maybe he's a better quarterback. I mean, fine. There's a chance that this high school substitute teacher is a better quarterback.
The way you make it sound like substitute teachers don't have a whole lot of extra skills.
Well, okay, so my roommate's a substitute teacher, and
could he be an NFL quarterback?
No.
Would he be as good at? Well, okay.
In fact, I will grant Sean Hill this. Out of all the substitute teachers I've ever known or interacted with, he's the single best quarterback. But
a screaming hot take from this episode. Sean Hill, good quarterback for a substitute teacher.
But he's already performing, worse than Austin Davis is this year, right? I mean, you could take a look at adjusted net yards per attempt, where Austin Davis is actually outperforming, Teddy Bridgewater. You could look at net yards per attempt, which is more predictive of future performance. He's at 5.8, which isn't bad at all, especially for like an undrafted free agent from Southern Miss. Whereas Sean Hill, he's just below that in net yards per attempt, but even worse at adjusted net yards per attempt at 4.6, which is in fact the third worst. It is ahead of Blake Bortles and Geno Smith. It is below Teddy Bridgewater. So there's that, but there's also the fact that what you have in Sean Hill. It's a pretty good backup quarterback, like floor backup quarterback. He's quite good. But Austin Davis is like a young quarterback who has the ability to develop and has the ability to turn into, maybe the next Tony Romo, maybe the next really good undrafted free agent quarterback. So you don't have to draft a quarterback, and they're not even trying to figure out. He showed some really good stuff in these games. He obviously didn't look very good against Minnesota, but I mean, you got to cut him some slack. He wasn't supposed to even be in that game. But yeah, he's progressed, really well, and they benched him because. I don't know. They don't even have a shot at the playoffs. The NFC West is being dominated by the Arizona Cardinals.
Well, for now, I mean, they could easily go 0-5.
Yeah, I suppose. I wouldn't count on it. That's kind of not. I don't know. I've never constructed a strategy that requires you to count on your opponents to mess up. That's.
That's true. Strategically, that does not give you a whole lot of leverage.
Yeah, but so the Arizona Cardinals would have to lose 5 straight games. St. Louis Rams would have to win 5 straight games, and then they would be tied. But the problem is losing 5 straight games would necessarily give up a game to the 49ers and to the Seahawks, I think, if I remember the Cardinals schedule correctly, which means that the 49ers and the Seahawks would only have to win 1 or 2 more games to be 10-6, right? So not only do the Cardinals have to lose 5 games and the Rams have to win 5 games, the 49ers and the Seahawks would have to lose the rest of their non-divisional games in order for the Rams to be tied for the division lead and use a tiebreaker, which they probably wouldn't win because they lose the head-to-head. So no, they can't make the playoffs, and they still put in Shaun Hill.
Yeah, well, and when you put it that way, it seems like a curious decision. Do you think the Matt Castle parallel holds up? Is he the St. Louis version of a quarterback who you can count on for almost exactly a league average number of wins and nothing more?
No, because Matt Castle is a slightly better backup quarterback. I don't know. Like I feel like Matt Castle has more of an ability to win, which is like the weirdest thing to say, because he's got really, really, really low-level starter capability in the right system. But I don't think Shaun Hill has that at all. So I don't think you can count on him to win a league average number of times. I don't think you can count on Shaun Hill to do the thing. I don't even know why the Rams are that focused on winning. And remember, I'm against tanking. You should try as much as possible to win. But in this case, when you're the underdog, the best opportunity to win games is to try high-risk, high-leverage strategies like your unknown quarterback who could develop mid-season. I just wrote a piece on the development of Peyton Manning, comparing it to sort of, the way that we're treating Teddy Bridgewater now, because there's a bunch of people who have already said after 7 starts, 8 games, that Teddy Bridgewater is through, that he's going to be a backup quarterback for the rest of his career. There's that Hasselbeck interview on 1500 ESPN that I've railed against, and then I've got a couple of people who have, tweeted at me that Teddy Bridgewater is no longer the future. And so, I looked at the press coverage and the statistics that Drew Brees and Peyton Manning put together in their first years. Peyton Manning's first 8 games were really bad. I mean, not only did they go 1-7, like from a record perspective, he threw 11 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. He threw for a relatively low-ish amount of yards per attempt. I mean, he was ranked, I want to say, 35 of 40 quarterbacks in passer rating and just in the yards per attempt and stuff like that in the first half of the season. The only thing that was saving him from hot takes was the existence of Ryan Leaf, who had literally snapped and thrown like a Gatorade at reporters and stuff like that, right? And was just an immature asshole because he's Ryan Leaf. And they were doing even worse. And so, that helped him, and it also helped him that, I think the rest of the quarterback class was like Brian Hoying, who's doing even worse for the Philadelphia Eagles. And Charlie Bash was actually probably the best performing rookie out of all of them, but was playing for the Detroit Lions, so they were losing and stuff like that. But Peyton Manning broke volumetric records, and people at the time focused a lot on that. So he got a bunch of positive coverage. But if he had received the coverage that we give quarterbacks today, he would have been eviscerated because he was doing terribly. He was doing about as well as Christian Ponder was doing his rookie year, right? In his first 8 games. And then in the next 8 games, Peyton Manning did better. He performed at about a league average rate in net yards per attempt, and then slightly below the league average rate in touchdown interception ratio. And they won 2 more games or something like that, and so he got praised. And it's weird to read these articles from 1998 about how a quarterback was performing abysmally is so obviously, including the quarterback. I mean, people didn't even question it. No one was like, yeah, maybe Peyton Manning doesn't have it, even though he put together these just awful rate statistics, because they were he broke the rookie passing record, which whose record he broke. Rick Mirer, one of the worst quarterbacks of all time. And then who broke his record? Sam Bradford. Come on. Not a useful record.
What? Yeah, right. That's so telling. But yeah, but that's the thing is that back in the late '90s there was no real functioning hot take machine that quarterbacks had to compete against. Because that's a real thing. Defending yourself from hot takes is
it's a new media skill, right?
Well, it's I think it's a new media side effect. I think I don't. hopefully we can get over this. Hopefully we can find a way to, pay for journalism that isn't so dependent on like the mass media model where it's just all about generating, attention and controversy and at the end of the day clicks, because
Well,
that's
you know what the RG3 stuff taught us was that the best way to defend yourself against hot takes is to agree with them. Like that's say,
some hot
oh,
takes,
you haven't won enough. You can't. You're not mature enough. You can't. You can't put together winning drives or winning games, even though you're putting together all of these great box score statistics. Me first quarterback, which is, as an aside, ridiculous because the quarterback gets his best statistics by like allowing other people to perform well. So that's like kind of just always a weird accusation to me. It's like accusing someone for being selfish because they like get the assist record in the NBA. But which actually, so Will Chamberlain managed to both be selfish and get the assist record. But the point is, it's kind of just like a weird accusation to levy. But we found out that if unless a quarterback blames themselves entirely for losses but doesn't take any credit for wins, and unless they say, "Yeah, I've got to work on my leadership," instead of defending by saying, "I think I'm a pretty decent leader," like you have to agree with the hot takes and just like sort of mellow them out. Like that's the defense that we figured out is the only one that works.
Yeah, you just have to play. You have to play judo. You have to be willing to engage in some hot take jujitsu and fight from your back. And I mean, hopefully the Twitterverse will respond in a more measured way and give you some breathing room and opportunity to actually excel. But how much time do you really want to give someone? I mean, I think it's unfair to give Teddy Bridgewater 7 games and then just suddenly declare him old and busted. Although we can cover more of that later in the show. But RG3's had a couple years. His time with the Redskins is pretty much done. He's probably not going to go to a good team. The history of injury really is it really slows things down for him. I think it's going to make his career much more likely to turn out sad than successful. I don't think there will be any amazing RG3 success stories or 60 for 60s.
I wouldn't be surprised if another team gave him like a full starting opportunity and like put a lot of faith in him and whatever, just because he had been so good his rookie year, though. Like I think maybe injury has irreparably ruined him. I think you're right, but I think that a lot of teams think that there's the possibility for an RG3 success story.
Well, I guess we'll find out in the off season.
Yeah, we'll find out. So also about the offseason, this is like interestingly just a bunch of talk about not the Vikings, which I'm okay with because who cares about the Vikings? But
no one anymore.
But I'm interested for RG3. I want him to be released, not for his sake. Obviously, that would be bad. But I want him to be released. I want Cam Newton to reject contract offers from the Carolina Panthers, stuff like that, because it would allow us to actually evaluate quarterback value in free agency when it's not Peyton Manning, right? Because all of the quarterback deals, people are talking about how they're inflating, but that's inevitable, et cetera, et cetera. You talk about the Kaepernick deal, you talk about the Dalton deal, and it would just be interesting to see, is it true that people would offer, Cam Newton more than the amount of money that the Bengals offered Andy Dalton? And the story with the Andy Dalton contract is obviously a little convoluted. He obviously got, a large average salary, but he got a low amount of guaranteed money, etc. But still, I mean, the Bengals hitched their wagon to him for at least 2 years because of guaranteed money. And Kaepernick has this really weird contract that he structured super poorly, but the numbers are at least shiny. And so it'd be nice to see what a quarterback in free agency is worth when you have, someone who is damaged but was electric, and someone who is electric-ish but just came off of a bad year, and so he's probably worth more than Andy Dalton, but it has questions and stuff like that. So that would just be interesting because we just don't see quarterbacks with starting capability hit free agency, except for like Matt Castle.
Yeah, and I think even then it would help if there were. I mean, that stuff never happens in a vacuum. there's always going to be one player or with the talent to really put their thumb on the scale of the prices, or to seemingly do so, like Kaepernick might have or might not have. I guess we won't know for like 7 years.
Right.
uh, or conversely, a team that has enough cap space, or enough junky players or young players to trade away to put their thumb on the scales of the trade value side of the equation. So, you know.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk Vikings a little bit. But
Sure.
first, I did want to take this time to go back and I guess redo last week's listener support promo. Um, I want to say thank you to everybody that has contributed to the show over the last couple of weeks. It's been really cool having people come up and support us in the way that they have. I mean, I talk about everybody needed and give us $5 once to help keep the lights on. And although it's pretty clear that not everyone has given, almost everybody who has contributed to the show has given us more than $5, which makes me believe that we are putting out a product that people think is worth, more than we're asking for it, which is really all we ever wanted to do, was give you something good and hopefully have you overvalue it a little bit, which seems to be bearing out, which is really great. So in the last couple of weeks, we've had Nate Schetzel contribute again. He's a regular contributor and fan of the show. Michael Moran and Ian Pauly also contributing. And my favorite this week, well, I guess last week, but my favorite contribution this week came from a PayPal account known as the Meggie and Steve Honeymoon Fund, which I got a kick out of for a couple of reasons. I mean, it's possible that these are just a couple of, well-connected nerds who, I mean, given that they listen to football podcasts, is probably accurate, who decided to be organized for their wedding, and instead of having, a whole long complicated registry, or in conjunction with the registry, they just had a PayPal account that people could donate to, probably much like ours, where the money would go straight to the Meggie and Steve Honeymoon Fund. Now, it is possible that Meggie and Steve have already taken their honeymoon, and that we are just receiving some largesse from a PayPal account with an absolutely adorable name. But I prefer to think that Meggie and Steve are still in the process of planning their wedding or their honeymoon, and they have generously taken a little chunk out of their honeymoon fund to support Norse Code, which really is the kind of community support that we never got, and frankly don't want to get from running ads all the time, and trying to tell you about testosterone replacements and this and that other thing. I mean, FanDuel's pretty cool, but you click around any SB Nation site, you're buried under FanDuel ads already. If you listen to any other podcast, you're probably buried under Audible ads already. You know about these services, so it's refreshing to us to be able to take the time to talk about our listeners and the good that they have already done for us, rather than sponsors and the potential good that they could do for our listeners. So thank you very much for supporting Norse Code as we go into the home stretch of the season. We'd like to redouble our commitment to bringing you the hottest takes about the Vikings, such as they are.
And masters in hot tech for Vance. No, absolutely. Thanks so much. It's actually been sort of overwhelming to see donations come in every week or every other week, just with like small messages about how much they enjoy the show, or why they're just like willingly giving up money with nothing, at least in the short term, to get in return. Obviously, they do get an associate producer credit, so I guess for whatever that's worth, we're providing them with a gift, not the other way around. But no,
well,
it is.
And they get ad-free Norse Code. Otherwise,
Yeah.
if it wasn't for our listeners, like we would still be on Blog Talk Radio. We'd still have those, stupid low-quality Blog Talk Radio pre-rolls playing at the beginning of every episode and at the end that we had nothing to do with. Those were just kind of part and parcel of being on Blog Talk Radio. And now we're done with that. We don't need FanDuel. We don't need Audible. We can just bring you hot take after hot take.
Yeah, and we don't have to deal with the terminal problem that Blog Talk Radio had, where at least twice, if not 3 or 4 times, we would upload a show, and Blog Talk Radio's like bumper or ad or whatever they were going to play before our show had a problem where for some whatever reason, a terminal marker or whatever, the rest of the show wouldn't play, and you'd only get to hear the ad. And so we don't have to deal with that. We get to curate our own content, and that's because of you guys. Thank you.
All killer, no filler. Thanks, everybody. So there was a game last week that we attempted to cover with Norse Code's least valuable player, Justice Mosqueda. And I'm glad in a way that our conclusions were kind of left out of the public record, because I was wildly irresponsible in my game score prognostication. I think I had said 75-3 or something as my score prediction. I had both the over and Green Bay by 9.5 as free money picks for the week, which neither one of those turned out to be true, continuing my abysmal history of picking Vikings games this season. But no, and the score made the game look closer than it was. But I think in a lot of ways our team acquitted itself really well against one of the top teams in the league. I mean, this was the fewest points that Green Bay had been held to since they played the Saints in New Orleans. And I mean, I was genuinely surprised to not see them hang 50 on us.
Yeah, so people like to talk about how there are no moral victories in football. And, like, okay, fine. If you're a coach or a player, you're not allowed to believe in those. That's okay. I totally agree with any take that eviscerates a coach or a player for believing in a moral victory. Fine. But, I mean, I talked about this, too. As soon as the game ended, I was like, so the Vikings played the Packers probably better than any team has in the past 7 weeks except for the Saints. And I say the past 7 weeks because that's when, Green Bay started to really turn it around, and that's when people attributed Aaron Rodgers for saying relax in a press conference or whatever. But so that was when Green Bay was sort of the Green Bay that people generally expect them to be, that they hadn't been last year because of injuries. And so, being the team that puts up sort of the best fight against Green Bay within that context really provides some demonstration of how good this team can be when only half of it is working, right? Because the offense wasn't particularly good. I mean, no one has to, sugarcoat that or anything like that. But the defense was stellar, sort of all things considered, in the context of playing Green Bay. I mean, Green Bay had to punt 4 times. That's more times than they had to punt in the past 4 games combined, right? And so I think, you talk about this game, you talk about the Vikings, and you have to take into account the fact that the Vikings hired a new head coach for a reason, drafted a quarterback for a reason, right? They were a terrible team. And so playing against a team that is supposed to be sort of one of the best in the NFL and playing them pretty closely is a good sign. It's not like, the end-all, be-all. I mean, bad teams play good teams close, every other week in the NFL, right? But it's still a pretty good sign of sort of who the Vikings can be. So, in terms of the context of this year, obviously the Vikings are still bad. But, I mean, Mike Zimmer's a pretty damn good coach. And, this is a defense that has like 8 different starters from last year and an offense that, they lost the right tackle, they lost the right guard, their quarterback's a rookie who's playing a little bit like shit. Their left tackle is the worst left tackle in the NFL. Their left guard is terrible. And so, all of that. And, the Vikings are within 3 points. So there's sort of a lot of potential to be had with this Vikings team as long as you sort of, like, fix some things, which I think is eminently possible.
So does it seem to you, I mean, we got a brand new head coach and, a functionally new cast of players on defense, but does it seem to you, because it seems this way to me, that Mike Zimmer has already kind of put his stamp and his identity on what this Vikings team is going to look like if he keeps his job for the next few years? Like, I think this is a pretty clear preview of the kind of team that Mike Zimmer wants to coach.
Yeah, I think so. It's actually on Monday in a presser. It's actually one of my favorite quotes from him in the past couple of weeks. And it's not even that funny or interesting. But, a reporter functionally asked, so your defense has earned a reputation for playing hard, right? People play hard for you. You got a hard defense. And, they put out a lot of effort out there. Are you proud that that's the reputation? And he was like, no. That's like the baseline level of expectation. They have to play hard. That's like, you don't get a gold star for that. they have to play well too, right? And I'm paraphrasing him, but he was like, yeah, I expect them to play hard, but they have to
This
be
isn't
good at their
this isn't
job,
the Los Feliz daycare or anything. We play to win the game.
right? And it's uh, yeah, and so you're sort of getting the identity of sort of at least Mike Zimmer's coaching style, if not a Mike Zimmer team, right? And the coaching style obviously sort of demands all of the sort of things that you would demand any reasonable football coach to demand, as well as a high degree of accountability and stuff like that. So I I think so, and I think that the defense is definitely sort of his baby. I mean, when you came in and he hired George Edwards as the defensive coordinator, and we were all asking sort of how much control Mike Zimmer would have over the defense, and he was like, a lot. I might call the plays, but I'll definitely design it, right? And we were like, okay, so George Edwards is like a non-entity, cool, and that's like that's working out really well. It's a really good defense. It's a top 10 defense on a good day. It's a top 5 defense.
And I mean, it looks like it can stay that way for more than this last half of now mostly meaningless season. I mean, not meaningless, but we're playoff hopes are dashed at this point. And I don't think that they were ever that significant in the first place, just because I mean, as good as our defense is, our offense sputters. And if there's one thing that we can count on, well, two things we can count on Teddy Bridgewater to have, it's one, unrelenting poise under pressure, and two, inability to pass accurately downfield.
That's true. He actually, if you take a look at his deep passes this year and his deep passes at Louisville, he actually passed more accurately at Louisville on these deep throws, which is probably the most concerning thing. But I mean, he's passing less accurately at every level of the game, intermediate, deep, and even short than he did at Louisville. So it's not like that's too surprising, but it is obnoxious. It's just like really annoying because you're watching a game and you're like, just keep the ball down, right? Like, just...
Why is everybody always throwing their hands up? Like, and it's frustrating because like we've said on the show, Greg Jennings is always open, and he did a pretty good job of making himself available this game. But again, Teddy was not able to take advantage. Charlie Johnson also had a pretty good game in terms of beating the defense, and we even saw flashes of the Cordero Patterson I think everybody was expecting in week 1.
Yeah, flashes. I think week 1 Cordero Patterson was peak Cordero Patterson.
Get it? Yeah. Get it? Flashes?
Oh no. Oh, God. Edit that out.
You edit it out. But no, seriously, like, do you think that the receiver core and Bridgewater can use the rest of the season to kind of get themselves more in sync?
Yeah, I think so. So I've been getting a lot of questions relatedly anyway to whether or not the Vikings would draft a receiver. And it's like a pretty decent receiver draft class. It's not like last year, right? But it's probably better than the year before. It's a pretty good receiver draft class. And, I think that the Vikings should take advantage of that and, get a good receiver who's going to be sort of undervalued and drop. But I don't think, like people are suggesting, that the Vikings should consider drafting a receiver in round 1. And yeah, I've mentioned this before. I'm not really a best player available kind of guy. And I think the only strategy that will really account for drafting a receiver in the first round is the best player available strategy. Just because I think that's a really poor way of managing efficiencies and value and playing time because, there's only 11 players on the field. You're operating in a closed metaphysical system. And so investing in a high value draft asset that where you're already strong takes snaps away from the other player and now you don't have value or whatever. But I mean, I wouldn't say the receivers are not a problem. I mean, there are times when they're not open. And so it's not always about Teddy managing, his chemistry with them, which obviously he needs to do sort of in a big way because he needs to know when they're going to be open before they're open. That's like quarterbacking in the NFL. It's just like a basic thing that needs to be done. I say basic. It's obviously incredibly complex and very difficult to do. But in terms of sort of the baseline skills that you need in the NFL, that's one of them. And so chemistry is a really big part of that. But yeah, I think that sort of the rest of the season provides that opportunity. I don't think that the season so far indicates there needs to be a high value investment in a quarterback, or sorry, in a receiver, or I guess a quarterback. I've heard some suggestions the Vikings should draft a quarterback in the first round because people are insanely impatient and don't understand how bad this draft class is for quarterbacks. Um, but uh, but yeah, I think that generally speaking, the rest of the season can be used from an offensive perspective to sort of figure that out. Obviously, the issue still has to be figuring out what to do in the context of that poor offensive line. I've written 2 or 3 times. I know Darren Page wrote a piece basically saying this after Phil Loadholt went down, that the offense just simply needs to adjust. A couple of times both he and I have mentioned that they need shorter pass drops. They need, which means pass patterns that develop quicker, and so that you can get rid of the ball faster, and so you don't have to because with deep pass drops you basically have to take 2.4, 2.5 seconds in the pocket, and that's sort of the maximum amount of time that you should expect an offensive lineman to continuously and reasonably block on a consistent basis anyway. And with this offensive line, that's not something that you can reasonably expect at all. And so the offense needs to adjust to account for that. I think that will probably help in the context of chemistry, but also in actually literally making the offense better and get more yards, put more points on the board and stuff like that. I think, there actually surprisingly have not been as many screen passes as I thought. You could increase the amount of those, but really just increasing the amount of short drop pass patterns, even constraint plays like draw plays, there haven't been as many of those as have been, as you might expect with a quick person like Jerick McKinnon, who can probably take advantage of sort of the open space that a well executed draw play can have. But yeah, I think that there's a couple of things that the offense can do this year to sort of feel things out in terms of next year's performance, and that's one of them.
Agree or disagree? The best thing we can do to improve Teddy Bridgewater's chances the rest of the season is give him more time to let go of the ball.
Yeah, I think the single best thing that you could do is give him time in the pocket. I don't know how, right? Like you can't just be like, boom, do it, right? But like,
can't just put another guy on the line and just be like, here, run block really well, or defend against pass blockers really well.
Well, so New England did that at the beginning of the year for a while, and that kind of did actually work out. I'm just putting that out there.
Well, what do you expect from the greatest team in the NFL? Yeah, I know.
Stop that, Dusty.
I know. I'm just speaking out of hurt.
Whatever. Your Broncos are going to win the Super Bowl, and you'll be happy.
I suspect they will make it to the Super Bowl. They certainly look like.
Are you believing this canard about how Peyton Manning collapses in the season? Are you one of those now?
I don't think it's necessarily Peyton Manning, but I don't know. We've been hearing for a long time about just how indomitable the Vikings defense is supposed to be, and it just never seems to happen against the kind of teams, again specifically the teams that are likely to be their competition deep in the playoffs or in the Super Bowl.
You mean the Broncos defense?
Yeah.
It's a slightly better than league average defense. If DeMarcus Ware was performing up to what he should be, that'd be better. What TJ Ward got injured, right? That's not good.
Yeah. No, that's bad.
Yeah. Although he hadn't been playing all that well until he got injured. I think in the game that he got injured, he was playing well.
That's true. On the other side of the ball, I no pun intended, I never thought I would be missing Monty Ball, but.
What is it? C.J. Anderson? He's been running kind of well, right?
Well, if by running well you mean he had like a career game this week, then yes. But I mean, it would be nice if he could continue having career games between now and the Super Bowl, or maybe replicate his performance in late January or early February. That would be ideal. Yes.
All right then. Problem solved.
So back to the Green Bay game, we saw some truly stellar pass defense, some of the best we've seen all season from the Vikings, I would say. Run defense, less good. And do you think part of that might just be because Eddie Lacy is so dynamic, or the Green Bay is so willing to use him in a variety of ways, or were we just asleep at the switch?
I think we were sleeping the switch. I mean, we saw a little bit of that in the previous game too, where the Vikings couldn't finish tackles, and particularly Anthony Barr. I mean, yeah. So Eddie Lacy is both fast and big, and that makes him difficult to take down. But I mean, he's not one of the best running backs in the NFL, right? He's very good, which means that I think it is less likely the case that the Vikings' run defense played poorly because of Eddie Lacy, and more the case that they played poorly because of themselves. I mean, there were times when linebackers were out of their gaps. There were times when Chad Greenway was blocked out of the play. There were times when Anthony Barr continued to miss tackles that I think are probably more representative of the problem. There are issues like, Robert Blanton still doesn't have the ability to bring Eddie Lacy down one-on-one, no matter how many times he tries. He continues to get dragged for additional yards. That's just a thing that's happening.
Yep.
But I think for the most part, the run defense was poor, because the run defense is poor. And this is a point I brought up right after the game. If Sharif Floyd had been healthy, and of course you can sort of if and or but any game to death, but it's a 3-point game. It's always difficult for me to say there's this non-quarterback player who, if he'd been in the game, would have swung the game by 3 points. It's always super difficult to say that because there's like 21 non-quarterbacks, and like how much of an impact does each one have on the game? Probably less than 3 points. But in this case, I feel like if Sharif Floyd had been healthy, there was a good chance that the Vikings either force this game into overtime or win, just because the run defense, I think, would have been much better because Tom Johnson hadn't played well, and Shamar Stephen played, I think, probably worse. And so when you have the ability to clog up one of the B gaps like that, I think it's just easier to defend against the run. And in this context, the run was able to provide them with the kinds of first downs that allowed them to set up sort of the rest of their offense. So I think in this case, one could take that away from a strong defense that could be even stronger and by itself would be enough to win a game against a team as powerful as Green Bay. It's a defense that can be that good, right? And I think that's sort of the takeaway.
Any other, I guess, major takeaways that we can take away from this game, other than that Green Bay is good and the Vikings are not?
Take away all the penalties, and Matt Khalil didn't have a terrible game. He was just a slightly below average game, but he did have those penalties, so it was pretty terrible.
Yeah, and the penalties, like, Vikings defense is known for incurring so few penalties, and then there was that whole horrible period when we just were insistent upon drawing penalties on nearly every offensive play, and I thought we had finally pulled away from that, but it was flashes of terrible on Sunday, regrettably, but hopefully that is not indicative of a trend. It seems like Zimmer runs a pretty tight ship as far as incurring penalties before the snap.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up because that was sort of one of the things that he was supposed to reduce just because he's a disciplinarian, right? I'm going to look up his penalty rates. That'll be fun.
In the meantime, we get an easy one this week, well, relatively easy, playing the Carolina Panthers, who are not a good team in a historically bad division. I think.
Yeah, astoundingly bad. Well, okay, so the thing about the NFC South is, as a division, it's like record, especially outside of division, is worse than the NFC West was back when the Seahawks won 7-9, right, when they made it to the playoffs at 7-9. But I think you would argue that the teams in the NFC South are better. Like, you would abstractly probably take each of those teams to be better than, 2009, 2010 NFC West teams. And you would argue that the NFC South had more talent, had more ability, had better teams in it than that NFC West, right? Like, does that feel right to you? It feels right to me.
That the NFC South is a little better this year than the NFC West was the year that the Seahawks won, going 7-9.
I mean, not just a little bit, but like obviously, like maybe not extraordinarily better because they do have a worse record, but it just feels like that's intuitively true to me.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, I guess, and that seems to be the media consensus. I mean, during the season when, I mean, well, first of all, whichever team wins the NFC South this year could easily do it with a 7-9 record. That is entirely within the realm of possibility. I think all the teams have a approximately equally difficult schedule, and they're all tied at 4-7, except for the Panthers, who are at 3-7-1.
Yeah,
Um,
well, someone I think had figured out that you could have a team. I mean, it would take extraordinary circumstances. It wouldn't happen, but you could have a team come out of the NFC South at 5-10-1. I think is the minimum number of wins. Yeah, 5.5 wins is the lowest number of wins you can have and still, I think, make it out of the NFC South.
Gosh, I'm going back and forth on the are the teams better thing, because I mean the Buccaneers are just not. The Buccaneers are the worst. They may
Yeah,
not
but what
be
was it? The 2010 Cardinals? I'm gonna look up the this NFC West.
also pretty objectively bad. The Falcons are tied for the lead 4-7 with the Saints, and I mean I think we said this before on the show that the Saints are or can be a bad team that masquerades as a good team. And I think that's true this season. I think they get a lot of credit for past seasons and just have not played terribly well this season. I mean, they lost 2 games in a row at home. That never happens. That hadn't happened in 3 years. And then, I mean, New Orleans is imploding. Atlanta's been imploding all season. Atlanta got destroyed by the Buccaneers, who stink. So by the transitive law of victory, the Falcons are much worse.
I think the bigger issue is the Falcons losing to the Browns, which I guess that's not actually that bad a problem because everyone in the AFC North is 7-4.
Yeah, the
Maybe it's
AFC
not
North is like the
embarrassing.
most difficult division in the league, and the Browns are kind of like, I mean, it's hard to be a breakout star in a division that difficult, but they are definitely not bottom feeders, which I think is what many people were suspecting slash predicting. I mean, remember at the beginning of the season we were asking whether or not we would see Johnny Football? Like, it seems
Well,
like
as soon as
that's
they drafted Johnny Manziel, you knew the Browns would do well. You didn't have to plan it. Just gave them that moxie they needed. It's interesting because they got rid of T.J. Ward, they got rid of DeQuell Jackson. They have a raw corner taking significant snaps in Justin Gilbert. They didn't change quarterbacks. They're still with Brian Hoyer, one of the many backup quarterbacks to Tom Brady playing in this league. Although I guess now that Ryan Mallett is out and Matt Castle are out, I think it's just Brian Hoyer. But but yeah, it's like kind of interesting. They didn't play for most of the season with Josh Gordon, and Jordan Cameron's had injury problems. And the Browns are 7-4 and like are a pretty decent team.
so I'm looking at an article on the Cat Scratch Reader, which is the hilarious name of the Carolina Panthers SB Nation blog, and there's a story on there about the historically bad NFC West in 2010 compared to the historically bad 2014 NFC South. Uh,
Wait, did they
according,
actually make the comparison?
uh, they project wins based on strength of schedule for the rest of the season for the 2014 NFC South, and it looks like the 2014 NFC South, if big favorites win and underdogs lose, will finish with 3 less wins between the two bottom teams than the 2010 NFC West. The Buccaneers are projected to go 3-13 and finish out at the bottom of the pack, with the Panthers going 5-10-1, and then the Falcons and the Saints tying at 7-9.
Well, but
And
I mean, if they're taking into account strength of schedule going forward, they should probably take into account strength of schedule going backwards. Like, what if the NFC West's outside of conference schedule that year was harder than the NFC South's outside of conference schedule? Because the NFC South has to play the AFC North, right? I mean, they have to do that. That's a problem. They have to play. I think they have to play the NFC East this year. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't pay attention to other teams that well. No, they have
so
to play the NFC North. which includes the Packers and the Lions, right? So I think it's a pretty decently difficult strength of schedule outside of conference. I can take a quick look at it, obviously, on Pro Football Reference. In fact, I'll do that just because this discussion is super interesting to me.
Yeah, go for it. Well, and I mean, you're saying that you can still, like, we could still have these, win totals turn out this way, but you could still, not be wrong because the NFC South has been playing more difficult teams out of their division than the NFC West did in 2010.
That's just so okay, so this is not good news. What I'm doing for them right now.
Are you about to prove the opposite conclusion?
Yeah. So their strength of schedule, on average, is slightly below average. So their strength of schedule's average point differential is negative 1.2 on Pro Football Reference. So that's the.
That would be a schedule that allows you 1.2 more points per game than a league average schedule. It would be slightly softer than average.
Correct. Oh my God, the NFC West schedule was so bad. I'm definitely right about this. It's actually one of the worst strength of schedules I may have seen. Hold on. Yeah, and so their average strength of schedule per game is negative 3.6. That's terrifyingly bad. Yeah.
Wow. So that's like getting an extra home field advantage plus a little more in every game you play, just because your opponents suck so badly. And they still managed to put together. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah. That's
I feel better about this conclusion because I don't tend to remember previous football seasons all that well, but I do remember how awful the NFC West was that year. So even if they finish with fewer wins, the NFC South is still better this year than the NFC West was in 2010. Jesus.
Well, we'll have to wait and see how many points are scored, and then we can, take.
Yeah, we can do it all at the end.
A little closer, yeah. A little closer analytical look at that. But yeah, that's interesting, and we get to be the lucky ones who play one of the tyingest teams with one in the NFL this season.
Right. The Vikings could surprise us all and get another tie.
Oof! Don't tempt fate.
Do you want to know what the models say about this game?
Sure. I'm very curious.
So I believe Vegas has Carolina winning by home field advantage by 3 points, right? So if you take a look at my efficiency model, it says that Carolina wins.
Other way around. Line opened with Minnesota as a 2.5-point favorite, and right now the average on Vegas Insider is Minnesota by 3.
Let me take a look at the lines I was looking at then, because that's odd. Unless I just entered them in wrong.
I think you might have a little bit of insomniac dyslexia.
It's probably my insomniac dyslexia. Yeah, so it gives Minnesota a home field advantage. This means that Minnesota, according to Vegas, like you said, should win by exactly home field advantage, which they have now. Quant Coach's model says that this game is a virtual tie. Using opponent-adjusted point differential, Minnesota should win by 3.5. Using my efficiency system, Minnesota should win by 3.2. Football Outsiders, this is not their official prediction. You can go to their picks page and get their official prediction, which is set with they use weather and injuries and all these other variables that are not just DVOA that are included in their predictions. And I'm not. I'm just using DVOA. But per DVOA, Minnesota should win by 4.6. I did the same thing with Advanced Football Analytics. I don't take into account external variables except their team efficiency scores, and it has this game as a virtual tie. So 2 systems have the game as a virtual tie. The other 3 systems have this game as a win by slightly more than Vegas would predict.
I'm suddenly very curious what Pickwatch has to say about this one. Oh, wow.
Half of
Um,
Pickwatch is never like in time to have like an interesting discussion about Pickwatch. But what does it say?
True. There are. Uh, looks like the Vikings are
Wow.
a pretty strong favorite
Yeah,
among
if you
those
take a
who
look
have
at
picked the
the
top
if you take a look
selection.
at the top 15 pickers, people who have picked 68% or better this season, they've all picked the Vikings. This does not include people who have not submitted a pick yet, including Don Banks, Dr. Roto, and Gordon McGinnis of PFF. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's a thing.
of the top 25, 25, 24, 23, 20, of the top 22 pickers, 19 have selected the Vikings. So
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Say that.
uh, that's curious. Cam Newton historically has been very good against Minnesota defenses.
Yeah, well,
Um,
this year he's been very bad
this,
against defenses.
this year he has been less good against all things. Um, in the last two games against Minnesota, he has had 6 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown with no picks and 128.6 uh, passer rating, aiming for his third in a row against Minnesota with 3+ passing touchdowns. I think that is not going to happen.
No, I don't think so.
That is my
Uh,
wildly irresponsible prognostication for this week that Cam Newton will not throw 3 touchdowns against the Vikings.
so related to that's fantastic. Thanks, Dusty. Related to this game, I have a surprise-ish number of the week, which is not to eclipse your number of the week, but it's 268.
Hmm.
It's related to this game.
268. That is almost exactly half of my number of the week.
Oh wow, that's not why I chose it.
No. 268. Number of career rushing yards Cam Newton has against the Vikings? No.
No, but that's that was a pretty inflated, if interesting, guess.
He would, yeah, that would have been some long touchdowns that he ran
Yeah.
for, or one long touchdown that he ran
One
for.
long touchdown and then a bunch of first downs, I guess. No, 268 is the total number of sack yards that Cam Newton has accrued this year. He leads the league in total sack yards taken. Without leading the league in sacks, by the way, that's just how Cam Newton plays. Yeah, no. So with 268 yards in 10 games, he's already surpassed the total number of sack yards he had in either 2011 or 2012, and is quickly approaching the number of sack yards he had in 2013.
Wow. Are we looking at potential conference or league records if this trend continues?
I could look it up real quick. So with 268, that's obviously 26.8 sack yards a game. We can take a look at
That is so many sack yards.
right. With I mean, and I'm not gonna say it's like without many. I mean, he has taken a lot of sacks too, but like the sack yardage to sack ratio is really bad. Also, he is not really at risk of breaking that record. So the record is held by a Philadelphia Eagles Randall Cunningham with 489 in 1986. That's 30.6 sack yards a game. That is a
What?
lot. Yeah.
What? I'm gonna have to stop and think about how that's possible after we finish the show because that just strikes me as entirely unreasonable. 30
Well,
yards.
Randall Cunningham has, and these were all while he was in Philadelphia, has 4 of the top 10.
not not a big fan of the lateral movement.
But if Cam Newton continues at this pace, he'd end up with 429 sack yards. That would put him just below 1997 Jeff George and just ahead of both 2005 and 2002 David Carr. And that is not someone whose sack yardage totals you ever want to beat. Puts him in the top 10 of all time. Well, I mean, since like 1982. Or rather, you can project back to like 1970. So since 1970. But yeah.
Well, I guess that's good news. Um, so you must anticipate our line will probably have our defensive line will probably have a pretty good game, run the numbers up a little bit against Cam.
I expect it, yeah. If they don't, that's really vastly disappointing.
Um, are we going to be able to get the offense going against Carolina this week?
I mean, the Carolina defense isn't as good as it was last year, right? So that's something that's like vastly in their favor. In fact, its ranking is actually one of the worstish offenses or defenses in the NFL. Um, I think it's possible to get sort of the offense going in a way that's like pretty optimistic and stuff. I think just in general, uh, the Carolina Panthers defense is actually probably weaker against the run, at least person for person, uh, than um, than they are against the pass. And so this is kind of something that I kind of hope Jerick McKinnon sort of just takes things and runs with it, right? I know Ben Tate is back. I don't want him to take really any significant snaps. He's still, I think, suffering from the injury bug that he got hit with earlier in the year. I think in his first game in the NFL. Um, but if you take sort of a look at how well a team defends at the run against the run on a consistent basis, and then index it to sort of their strength of opponent, Carolina is actually probably the sixth worst in the NFL at defending against run success rate, preventing first downs and run, preventing immediate gains against the run, stuff like that. So it's definitely possible, but I think that the offense is probably going to have to run through McKinnon, and maybe Joe Banyard gets more snaps. He looked pretty decent in last week's game. But yeah, I think the offense gets going. I just don't think the way to get the offense going is necessarily through Teddy, because I think the run defense for Carolina, as weird as that is, given that they have Kuechly and Lotulelei and a bunch of like good players, I think the best way to do it is actually through the ground. They're like an average pass defense. I don't know what the numbers say, but looking at them, they're like an average pass defense. Dusty?
Even I know to hold out for the season. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah,
You
you
hear me
just kind of cut.
now?
Yes, you just kind of cut in and out.
Oh, okay. Um. Anyway, I was saying. So we lost Phil Loadhole. Mike Harris, I guess, will be his replacement. We signed Jamarcus again from free agency to ability on our already kind of busted up line. Do you think we can take it, or are they going to be a net neutral, potentially net bad?
Um, I think I think Mike Harris is going to be a pretty huge liability. I think that signing Jamarcus Webb doesn't do much. I mean, he was like a decent backup in the limited snaps he played for the Vikings, but if you remember, he did allow that safety that Ponder took on. It was just a really bad sack that he gave up. Other than that, he was pretty decent last year for the Vikings. I still think Mike Harris takes snaps ahead of him, obviously, because Harris has been on the team and Webb is not. But it's the worst pair of starting tackles in the NFL. If Mike Harris is half as bad, if he's improved so well, so significantly that he's only half as bad as he was in 2012, when he's in fairness an undrafted rookie free agent playing because of injury, that does need to be said. I still think it's the worst pair of starting offensive tackles in the NFL. It's so bad. You've got Joe Berger, who's playing probably better than you'd expect a backup to play at guard, but he's still not playing extraordinarily well. And then you've got Charlie Johnson. I just don't think this offensive line can pass protect very well at all. As a run blocking line, they're better. I wouldn't say they're average, but they're better. And
You answered this to some extent in a question that you answered on the mailbag, but I want to give you a chance to vent about it here. uh, where's David Yankee? Haven't we gotten ourselves into a situation where we could potentially be getting him some snaps?
Um, no, yeah, I did mention this in sort of the Vikings journal mailbag too. So I've heard from a couple of people that Zimmer said that Yankee needs to get stronger, which I don't recall hearing from a press conference, and that would actually kind of surprise me. His upper body strength didn't rate as well, sort of as a number of other guards in the class, but his lower body strength, which is where offensive linemen tend to win, is up there. It's quite good. Um, and so to say that he necessarily needs more strength was a little bit odd to me, but whatever. I think that there's some technique things that they're working out with him. I think that those balance issues are pretty concerning to them right now. And I think we're just not going to see him because, I mean, if you think about it, we would have seen him by now because as soon as Brandon Fusco went down, you'd think whoever they like most as a backup guard would go in, and Ducasse went in and he did terribly, and so when he got injured, Joe Berger went in and he outperformed Ducasse. So when Ducasse got healthy, Berger stayed in. But then you have Phil Loadholt goes down, and Yankee played left tackle and left guard in college, All-American in both. Ducasse played right tackle and right guard for the New York Jets. And they brought in Mike Harris, who whatever. And Austin Wentworth has been active in more games than David Yankee has, and he's both a guard and a tackle as well. I mean, the Vikings have 10 offensive linemen, and Yankee's clearly the 10th offensive lineman. So I don't know why we haven't seen him, right? I mean, he is a 5th-round pick. People should probably adjust their expectations with that in mind. I'm still having trouble adjusting my expectations with that in mind. But he is a 5th-round pick. He's clearly the 10th on the depth chart. I don't know why he's the 10th. I don't know why the Vikings thought, Ducasse was better, but they've seen significantly more of Yankee than I have. That Yankee was decent in the preseason. I don't think that was true of Ducasse. But, for whatever reason, he's being left out. I don't think we'll see him this year at all. Unless there's more injuries, so I guess knock on wood.
As well, yeah. Just you wait. The week 17 will be starting Ducasse and Yankee guards. That's a horrifying thought. So score predictions then.
Well, I'm gonna stick with my model and say that the Vikings win by 3. What does the Vegas have as the over/under on this game?
43.
Okay.
Is the other side doing it, but there are a couple of sports books.
You're cutting in and out again. I can't hear you.
Oh, I would say that 23-20 is probably a fair score. 24-20, I think would pretty much fit your model and Vegas's model pretty accurately. And it seems pretty reasonable. I think we could even go as low as could be aim for Carolina, especially if they give up a pick 6 or 2 and we can score a defensive touchdown or 2. And I think we could see a score as high as maybe 27-10. But I would be genuinely surprised if Carolina can peel off more than 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I would. I was about to say that too. I would take the under, and so I was going to guess something like 2017 or 17-14. I'm gonna guess 17-14 Minnesota.
Okay. I've been recording these predictions because they have almost all been wrong.
Yep.
The Vikings have done a good job of stymieing both us and bookmakers, although it seems like every time we diverge from bookmakers, then we end up with a game that
right
is within 1 point of the over/under. But such as it is, we're going to win this game, so we've got that going for us at least. Do you have a wildly irresponsible prognostication for this week?
Yeah, I think the The winner of the NFC South is going to have 6 wins. That's my wildly irresponsible prognostication.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it for like a big
6-10 and in the playoffs for 2 minutes.
Yep.
We had some pretty clear arguments supporting that conclusion. Unless by some miracle Carolina manages to win it and then they go 6-9-1. That's good. I have a prognostication that is slightly less irresponsible, but would be fun to see. A difficult thing to be the best in the league at anything any given season. My wildly second, I believe he is 4th in the league with 9, but my prediction is as the league sack leader.
All right, yeah. If I just take a look at sort of the official sack statistics instead of Pro Football Focus's more accurate but non-official sack statistics, Everson Griffin is in fact in 9th place right now with 9.0 sacks. He just couldn't keep up. I have no idea what you just said.
Look up, man. I'm foolishly trying to want to crash. Well, at any rate, Griffin's going to have to average probably 2 sacks a game to close out the season.
So you'd have to nearly set
people higher up are
going
to have to start.
Because that would be 21
from
sacks.
This point of the season on.
Well, if he got 12 more sacks. Oh, sorry, I was thinking about if there were 6 games left. Never mind. He doesn't have to set the sack record to get it. He just has to get 19.5. No big deal.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's conceivable, difficult.
It would be difficult for me to imagine Justin Houston dropping off, though. He's been on a tear. I mean, he hasn't just been getting a lot of sacks. Like, you take a look at like players, and you can usually tell if their sack production is sustainable by looking at sort of the number of pressures overall that they have, and if it's inconsistent with the ranking in terms of the number of sacks overall they have, you can pretty much determine that they're unsustainable in their sack production. And Jared Allen was that, but he still was able to nearly set the sack record. So it's not always, the case, but that's just sort of how statistics work. But Justin Houston has been playing really, really, really well. He doesn't just have 13 or whatever sacks. He also has 39 quarterback hurries, which leads his position in quarterback hurries. And I believe it also leads all pass rushers in quarterback hurries with 39. So it does. I just looked at it. Yeah, he leads all pass rushers with 39 hurries. So I think that his sack production is also sustainable at this rate. So yes, that is a wildly irresponsible prognostication.
I wanted to bring up Justice Mosqueda's wildly irresponsible prognostications, given that he has one of the only prognostications that can still come true. The is that J. Watt finishes as one of the producers for the Houston Texans, second right now. But on episode 57, that is never to be. That J.J. Watt will finish the season with more touchdowns than Calvin Johnson.
I believe
he
currently has more touchdowns than Calvin Johnson, which is the weirdest part about all of that. Like he has 3 yards from scrimmage, 2 touchdowns from scrimmage.
You gave me the idea.
Yeah.
Ha. So there you go. J.J. Watt, human football machine.
Yeah, I love him. Did you see that that story where he like unsolicited just wrote a letter to like the Houston police and fire departments and just like thanked him for Thanksgiving? He's just like a he's like God's perfect quarterback. Or not quarterback, but he is. Maybe they should have him play quarterback. Dusty, if you're saying things, I can't hear you. Still can't hear you. And this video chat has ended. All right.
The red light's on. Now I just have to find Arif. I'm like reaching. Ah, are
All
we
right.
back? Did we reconnect?
We did reconnect.
Our our two tin cans got separated. The string. Well, that's good. Anyway, this week, my number of the week is 538 or 538.
Is it related to the website or the number of electoral votes there are in the United States?
The total number of senators and congressional representatives from which that number is derived? No, it is not.
Well, it's not derived from that because DC gets 3 votes.
That's well, that's fair. Well, they have because they have representatives who sit in Congress, but they don't vote on anything. Like they're not
Well, they're not called representatives; they're non-voting delegates.
delegates. Yes, 3 delegates in Congress. I misspoke. Thank you for the civics lesson.
Yeah, no problem.
But no, it is not that. 538 in this context is the number of rush yards that Jerick McKinnon currently has, leading all NFL rookies this season.
That is fantastic news. That is because he is good at being a running back. That's my hot take. The whole damn thing.
That is correct. And this week I've increased that spread, I think, a little bit by being good at running the ball. And I believe your primary hot take about the Carolina game is that the Vikings will do good if Jerick McKinnon does good at running the ball.
Yeah, I would think that is more of a cold take, but yes. I think the Vikings are in prime position to. He also leads all rookies
in if we can stop
yards
that
after
off.
contact per attempt, too.
Oh, wow. I actually like that one better
Yeah.
than just total yards. He just wants to down.
Yep.
I'm hoping that we did not, make contact with our listeners last week, but we can recycle a few of these questions. Not all of them were Bears or Green Bay specific, and so Nate Schetzel, frequent contributor, both monetarily and wordsily to the show, writes us with a great question of the way. Of number of games Adrian Peterson will play this year to
So I still actually cannot hear things, but I'm going to go, because I can see the question, I'm going to go closer to the number of dollars overpaid to Roger Goodell each year in terms of the scale. That relationship is super boned. It's in ashes because the NFL continues to lie to the NFLPA. There's no sense of good faith negotiations. The NFLPA continues to try and negotiate different procedures and processes and policies by which the NFL engages in discipline. The NFL does not listen, in part because the NFLPA gave them the right to not listen by giving Roger Goodell broad authority on how to determine punishments and suspensions. The NFLPA has continued to try to establish procedures and policies for other things as well, not just player punishment. They have, for example, tried to figure out, the HGH policy, right, where they basically lost the negotiation on baseline testing and things like that. They have had difficulties with the drug policy, and the fact that the NFL even worked with them on the drug policy is kind of a win for them. It's an ashes because the NFL continues to lie to the labor organization that represents their employees, and we're just lucky that the CBA doesn't expire until 2020 or something like that, because this is not conducive to a good negotiating environment. I think it's being accelerated by the fact that the players are really upset with the NFL, and so they're going to vote for an NFLPA executive director who also does not like the NFL, and I think that'll accelerate the decline of the relationship.
Good. I'm glad you were answering that question because someone cut my string again. All right. I think that it is relationship between the Players Association and the league is just emblematic of how difficult labor relations are for any company in America right now. And I mean,
I think this one is
without some
exacerbated by
sort
the
of
fact
broader
that
cultural change,
I think it's exacerbated by the fact that there's no other labor market for these players, right? I think that a lot of companies dealing with unions lose leverage relative to the NFL just because those unions control like sort of who the labor gets contracted to, and so they have the ability to negotiate a little bit better because you know they're not limited to a monopoly market, whereas the NFL is a monopoly. You can't play in Russia or whatever, not like the NHL, right? You can't play in Japan like the MLB, and you can't play in China like the NBA. So it's even worse.
right now, but if the league gets its way, be it some conglomerate. I mean, the league wants that to be an option, and I mean, I think there's still room for the playing field to change a little bit with things like the FXFL. But I think by and large in sports, you see ownership that is not afraid to use lockouts to the limiting effects of kind of monopoly power on labor relations, which are maybe why state-sanctioned monopolies are not such a great idea.
Hey, keep politics out of this podcast.
I know I have stepped too close to the line. Um, Thad Chesley writes us. I know that's good. I was before the show. I was watching Saturday Night Live. They had like a clip marathon of all the great Thanksgiving Saturday Night Live skits, including Martha Stewart and Alec Baldwin making some sweaty balls. I will not go. I will not go too deeply into the process, but which basically requires a bunch of semi-sweet chocolate or bittersweet chocolate, unsalted butter, some heavy cream. The secret to this recipe is actually a little bit of corn syrup to keep the texture of the chocolate, uniform as you are microwaving it. Which, if you want to heat chocolate up slowly, microwaves are the second best way to do it. If you want to get it from ever, it's really important if you're making truffles, because that's what, like, if chocolate stays at or below that temperature, spongy consistency that the outside of a truffle should have, the best way to maintain that is by just keeping just a glass to use and control over the temperature. Anyway, if chocolate truffles are your thing, in a microwave, the recipe that will be linked in the show notes is a great way to make sweaty balls. CC Norseman writes us, which offense in the NFL has the most backups currently starting? And by that he means backups by backups he means people who were not a starter in week 1.
I forgot what my answer to this question was. It was pretty good, but it's definitely not the Vikings. Or it wasn't. That Phil Lodeholt injury does change things a little bit. But do you remember what my answer was last week?
Moving target. I want to say it was Arizona.
Yeah, because I think because Larry Fitzgerald was out at the time, and obviously, Carson Palmer went down, and then they had some offensive line issues. They're rotating their tight ends, and so the person who started week 1 isn't starting now. Yeah, no, I think actually that does make sense to me. Oh, and they don't like the running backs anymore, so there you go. Arizona. I'm not even going to think about it too much. Arizona.
Kyle all right, so doesn't it seem silly to add Ben Tate at least for Keith?
So Kyle Segal, of course, said Marquise Goldston instead of Marquise Gray. I think so. I mentioned this on Twitter. Um, so the thing with Ben Tate is that when he's not injured, he's theoretically an extraordinarily explosive back. His combine scores were in the top 10% of combine scores for running backs in the NFL, particularly when it comes to agility and speed. He could be, sort of one of the more physically talented running backs in the NFL. He hasn't shown that so far. He did really well in his rookie year for Houston, which isn't to say that he has the ability to be one of the best running backs in the NFL in a different system, because he's been, I believe, a zone blocking system one-cut running back all his life. I think that his versatility is limited in that respect because it's very difficult for him to make a second move. He's very good at planting and moving. When he finds a hole, I don't think he has the ability to adapt to a different system as easily. I don't think he has as much upside. I think that people are forgetting that Marquise Gray, if we're talking about physical upside, is also very physically capable. He's in the 72nd percent, I think, of all tight ends in terms of his physical capabilities, and he also plays faster than he runs, which is also nice to see. I think that he has more developmental ability, but it is important to point out that Ben Tate is young, right? And so if he becomes healthy, that would be quite the 1-2 punch for the Vikings. Having Jerick McKinnon and Ben Tate, wouldn't have to worry about Matt Asiata. But for right now, Ben Tate has shown limited explosion. He's shown limited explosion ever since he arrived in Cleveland. People say that he got injured in week 1 in Cleveland, and so he doesn't look good. And then after their center went down, which is, before the time he even came back to Cleveland, the running game declined, so it's not his fault. But even if you don't look at the numbers, right, he actually just does not look explosive. He didn't look explosive in his first week before his injury because he was already injury prone, or not injury prone, he's already riddled with injuries, rather, by the time he entered free agency, which is why he ended up in Cleveland and why Cleveland ended up drafting 2 running backs anyway. And so it's not just that his numbers are bad, and they are. It's not just that his numbers are worse than the other 2 running backs that he is playing with, and they are. It's that on film he doesn't look like the player he was supposed to be when he was coming out as a rookie. And I think that his potential is lower than the potential of someone like Marquise Gray, even if he is more likely to hit that potential than Marquise Gray, who obviously is extremely raw and hasn't played tight end in the NFL for very long, or tight end, period, for very long. I don't think it makes sense, but I guess no one, as far as I know, has picked up Marquise Gray, so, I guess he's available whenever you want him. The Vikings do have Kyle Rudolph back, so it's not like they needed that many tight ends, but I think it probably would have actually made more sense to release someone like Zach Line, who's not even active on game days anyway. Are you there?
Producer and regular contributor. Yep. Our internet connection is very tenuous. I'm going to burn through this last question. Then I think do it. Bridgewater to look like Manning against the Rams every week. Why did Teddy look so good that one game? Even versus brutal defenses like the Bucs and the Bears, he looks the same. Or just full ponder.
I'll answer this one and his next question. So his next question is, are receivers doing the wrong things?
Kind of a lot all in.
Yeah. And then how many plays did Asiata blow? and do we only sign running backs with small hands? It's a lot of questions. So I don't even know if the running backs have been doing all the wrong things. So there's just so many things in this question. First, Teddy looked pretty good in that one game because the Atlanta defense is bad. That's true. That's one of the reasons. One of the other reasons is that he didn't think too much in that game. He has been thinking a lot in these other games. That's another reason. Bad defenses like the Bucs and the Bears, he doesn't look great. That's fine. That's what happens. He's a rookie. I would say it is way, way, way too early to say that he is going full Freeman or full Ponder because rookie quarterbacks in general don't do well. If 2012 had never happened, people would be okay with this. But people see, 2011 Cam Newton, people see Andrew Luck, people see Russell Wilson, they see Robert Griffin III, who's not even good anymore, have these fantastic rookie seasons. Even players like Nick Foles just show up and they're good early. even though Nick Foles also fell off. Um, and they forget that generally speaking, this is just sort of a blip. I mean, yeah, you can probably expect rookies to get better than they were in the past, but the NFL has gotten better by sort of a similar amount, so it's like really difficult to gauge. Um, but generally speaking, rookies do poorly. It is unlikely, for example, that over the last 2 years that like all 6 or 7 rookie players to have taken significant snaps are all bad, right? But they've all been playing really poorly, especially in those rookie years. And so I think it's just kind of ridiculous to say that Teddy Bridgewater has gone full Ponder or full Freeman or whatever, because that's just what rookie quarterbacks do. I mean, if Teddy fixes the one thing, right? If he fixes the height of the passes, which was not, again, it's not a problem at Louisville. He did not regularly overthrow his receivers at Louisville. If he gets his passes down, then we're talking about how great of a quarterback he is and how fantastic his run has been. And if you take a look at him in situations where he's not thinking as much, you take a look at him in hurry up, in 2-minute situations, you take a look at him sort of in the fourth quarter. I mean, he has 3 fourth quarter comebacks, right? He's been playing spectacularly. This is the kind of player that you want him to be, and so it's it's not something I'd worry about. I wrote pretty extensively on this question, mentioned that earlier in the podcast, but it's like not a big deal. He's not doing full anything. Occasionally the receivers are doing the wrong things. They're doing fewer wrong things than they had been earlier, actually, even though Teddy looks about the same. So I wouldn't say that. I don't think the running backs have been doing the wrong things. I don't know why that was mentioned. Was Asiata in the game last week? I don't think he blew that many plays. I don't think he was in the game.
Did he even see 3 plays? Like, I don't know.
No, he had a concussion. He was like not active.
Yeah. So 0 is the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny that Josh mentions Peyton Manning against the Rams, because yes, I mean that was terrible and everything. But I mean, if like you wrote about and mentioned earlier in the podcast, if there was ever anyone who would never have survived the hot take gauntlet after a rookie season, it would have been Peyton Manning, and no one disputes that he's one of the greatest of all time.
It's kind of ridiculous that this is a thing. I don't know. Why are we getting these questions like all the damn time?
Because it happened last year. I mean, it was different last year. It was a little less annoying when we could agree with everybody and say yes, Christian Ponder sucks, but which we still say, it turns out, every week. But it's just I think it's just the nature of football fandom. People see something not working on the field, and their first instinct is, well, let's just try something else for its own sake, even if there is no logical reason to try it, and lots of good logical reasons why you shouldn't. We're not assistant managing a McDonald's here. We're trying to an NFL franchise. But no, I'm serious. And I talked about this a little bit last year. I've been kind of holding off on it this year, but it's really starting to kind of rear its head again with this Teddy Bridgewater stuff. It's like everybody wants to be the assistant manager of their McDonald's and get their fastest people on the registers and their best cooks on the line. And if they just switch people enough around in positions, then since the positions are all roughly equally unskilled, if you just switch out enough people, eventually you have a system that works. And that's just not the way that, a closed metaphysical system, as you put it, like the NFL works. Like there are position players, some of which are much rarer than others, and a lot of these positions take time to learn, and no team plays in a vacuum. And there are just, so many variables that you can't, when it's one thing to fire somebody who shows up 15 minutes late for their shift 3 times in a row at McDonald's, because you can replace that guy pretty easily. But, replacing Teddy Bridgewater is much more difficult because, one, you don't get that, draft pick back. You only get whatever you can trade the player for, and his, trade stock is probably not super high right now. And you, what are you going to get instead? What do we exchange him with? It's not like there is another Teddy Bridgewater that we can just, sneak in the draft. Because remember how excited we were to draft Teddy Bridgewater? He was considered a steal. And we're the chances that we'll be able to just, find another steal like that in the next draft and just like, oh, whatever, we'll just draft another one. That's not realistic. And trading for a quarterback, I think we've seen how well that goes. I mean, do you really want RG3 on the Vikings? Like, because
someone called into 1500 ESPN and said that. They're like, hey, what about RG3?
that person, I don't know who it is. I hope it wasn't anybody whose opinion is worth respecting, because I just lost a little bit of respect for it. Well, good. That person exemplifies exactly the kind of attitude that I'm talking about. That I think is, I mean, it's fun. It makes for good, barroom arguments, and it makes for good sports talk radio. I mean, we're talking about it now, but I mean, it's just really not a smart way to think about your football team.
Yeah, too many freezing takes on Norse code, I think. Yeah, no, it's obnoxious. I don't know. The thing is, if someone had written in something like, "Hey, Teddy sucks this year. I don't think this has any bearing on any other years necessarily, but I mean, he sucks this year, right? Is there anything to do about it?" And I would answer that question without being upset, because he does suck this year. He sucks, right? He's a rookie quarterback, and rookie quarterbacks tend to suck. Fine. Is there anything to do about it? Well, we talked about that a little bit. Anything that's changing the design of the offense to cover for it. But yeah, I mean, you can admit that he sucks and that it also doesn't mean anything in terms of what to do.
Exactly. We don't have to go around comparing him to Josh Freeman just because he is a rookie and sucks.
Yeah, also, Josh Freeman's second year was phenomenal, so I hope he has Josh Freeman's second year. He should have gone to the Pro Bowl that year. I just don't want him to follow the Josh Freeman career arc. But yeah, if his second year is like Josh Freeman's, I have no worries.
Then we can come back and revisit this discussion and reignite that comparison at an appropriate time.
Right, yeah. It's like, so is he Josh Freeman or is he Peyton Manning? Peyton Manning's second year was pretty good too. Who knows?
Now that's a hot take. Oh boy. What are you doing for Thanksgiving? I guess that's the end of the mailbag. I'll just throw that out there. Do you have? Are you with friends? Or are you with family? Both.
Friends. My girlfriend's going to come back from. I guess people do Thanksgiving at lunch a lot. I don't know.
Well, it seems like it. Like I think we as a culture want to do Thanksgiving at lunch, because even though we call it Thanksgiving dinner, for some reason everybody has to be there at 2:30.
Yeah, I guess. I don't really know what the deal is, but. My girlfriend's going to come back from that around 5 or whatever. By then, I'll have most things going. So I had this conversation on Twitter. I think turkey is a trash meat. Like all meats, you can make it taste good. I don't think turkey necessarily tastes bad, as a rule. But I think that it has the least potential among all meats to taste the best. And so, and my girlfriend absolutely agrees. She hates turkey as well. Well, neither of us hate turkey, but you get my point, right? That if we're going to work with a meat, we might as well work with something that has a little more to it. So we're doing a spiral cut ham. And I got into a big argument over Twitter over which meat is better, ham or turkey. And I think the issue was they were thinking about like lunch meat ham that you buy from a deli.
They're thinking like ham water added. That's actually only like 70% ham by FDA regulation.
Yeah, in fact, the last time we tried to buy ham, we walked out of the grocery store with no hams because all of the hams were ham water added. They were reconstituted. Some of them were reconstituted, of course, but none was just like, hey, we went to the butcher. We were just like, do you just have like a ham? Can I just like take one? And they're like, nope, we only have like sort of that packaged stuff.
All we have are country hams and ham water added. And you're like, but I just want a real ham with a little less water added.
Yeah, right? But yeah, and so and it's not even like, and you know me, I don't really care about like chemicals or whatever. I'm not like a member of an organic food movement. I love chemicals in food. They make food great. They are food, but
you're not doing this out of some like misguided desire to try and pardon another turkey or anything.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, like screw them both. Screw pigs. Screw turkeys. I'll eat them. But
I'd rather eat a pig.
The additives to pigs genuinely, or additives to ham, I should say, when you package it, genuinely make ham not taste good. And so we're looking for the right ham, and we found it, so we're pretty happy. But this conversation we're having, they're like comparing deli sandwich ham that you could just buy it at a grocery store in like an Oscar Mayer package to a roast turkey, which obviously the roast turkey is better. But if you compare like a spiral cut honey glaze, not even honey glaze. It's gonna be like brown sugar and mustard and Coke. It's gonna be delicious. To a roasted turkey. Obviously, the ham is way better, so that's what we're doing. Um, so we'll do that. We've got a really great mashed potato recipe we're going to use. It's got whole whipping cream. It's got butter, obviously, because it's mashed potatoes. It's got a little bit of sour cream in it. It's got chives. But my favorite thing in the mashed potatoes is roasted garlic. If you add roasted garlic to mashed potatoes and just mash them in, it is so delicious and nutty and heavenly. So we're going to do that.
Ooh, so here's a little bit of unsolicited garlic mashed potato advice. This is something that I've done for a few years, and everybody has always loved it. I will take the just some cloves of fresh garlic and heavy whipping cream, and I will just like simmer the cloves of garlic, not minced or anything, just peeled, cut the little bottoms off, and throw them in the cream. I will simmer them in the cream for as long as I can stand it. Half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour if I don't go insane from the smell of cream and garlic mixing together and just like start eating it with my hands. But I'll just simmer the garlic and cream together, and then I will add the softened garlic and cream just directly into the mashed potatoes and get after it with the potato masher. And the garlic loses a lot of its like really strong
pungency and
in the cream, and the cream picks up the flavors of the garlic and spreads them around, and you still get little occasional nebula of garlic that have not been completely mashed out in the potatoes. It is roasted garlic is also super good. You get a little bit nuttier flavors out of roasted garlic, but simmered garlic cream it'll make you extremely popular if you get stuck with mashed potato duty at Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, 1 year I got stuck with mashed potato duty for my family. Then I had it for the rest of my life because the mashed potatoes were so good. I love mashed potatoes so much. So we're going to do that. Actually, that cream idea sounds fantastic. We're going to, actually, now that I think about it, I'm going to propose this to my girlfriend where we do half the garlic in cream and simmer it, and do half the garlic roasted. And that way we'll have two kinds of garlic flavors in mashed potatoes. I really like that idea. That's really good.
Wow, that is some intense garlic preparation. I like the way you think.
Yeah, and then we're gonna do sweet potatoes, but without marshmallows because we're not savages.
This isn't the South.
Yeah, we're just gonna do like really good sweet potatoes. We're worried because we were doing both sweet potatoes and squash, but whatever. So we're gonna have little squash bowls of rice. And we're still trying to figure out vegetables. I think we settled on Brussels sprouts. Those are delicious with a little bit of bacon and stuff like that, and then obviously a little bit of corn and butter, just something simple. But yeah, that's the Thanksgiving, and then we should probably do a dessert like a pumpkin or pecan pie, but probably won't.
Oh, pumpkin over pecan if you must do pie, but really pie is such an afterthought at Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I mean I massively prefer pumpkin to pecan, but I mean I don't argue the point when it comes up.
If you're doing sweet potatoes and squash, that should be plenty. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You're not cooking for 20. I eschew culinary cultural tradition whenever possible. I am
molecular gastronomy or turkey. I saw that episode of Top Chef. It was terrible.
Oh God. Yeah, I spent $400 on a vacuum sealer and a sous vide machine, so now I can make sure that my breast is exactly the same internal temperature as the jump off a bridge.
We're thinking that's a long-term investment for us.
It would be nice, but I feel like if I were to have a sous vide like immersion cooker, I would just eat a lot more expensive meat, because I would be assured that it would always be perfectly cooked.
Right? Yeah, you could put in less fatty meats and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then my food cost goes way up. Then I'm buying pork tenderloin instead of pork shoulder. Like, but so I am not even doing turkey because turkey's been done to death. Turkey isn't even that good, and I am cooking for
right.
I'm doing it for 4 or fewer people, and so doing a whole turkey is freaking stupid. It's just a colossal waste of time and money, and those like turkey breasts or whatever that you can buy, where it's just like, the top third of the turkey that they just slice off and wrap up in a different package and give to you. That's really my only option. But cooking those is even dumber than cooking a whole turkey, because you don't get any of the collagen from inside. There's no leg.
Mm-hmm.
There's no like.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, screw it. I'm just gonna make a nice peppery arugula salad and a huge ass pan of baked ziti, and if anybody wants to eat it, they can. And
Oh, okay.
I guarantee you it will all be gone. Everyone will be unconscious, and it will all be gone, because I don't. When I'm cooking for that few people, why make 6 dishes and a bunch of sides? I'm just going to go with one, both show-stopping and heart-stopping dish, and a salad to green it up a little bit, and call it a day. Because for me, I can be grateful without having to, create a flow chart that will describe my cooking process for the day.
All right. That's our Thanksgivings.
It's a left field Thanksgiving for you to contemplate as you're sneaking listens to Norse code away from family and friends.
Derek Whitmore pointed out that the best way to spend time at Thanksgiving is to spend a good, solid amount of time with your family, say half an hour, and then abscond to another room and listen to podcasts. And I wholeheartedly agree with him.
It's true. There will be 2 football games on, and the first one should be fun and interesting. But well, actually, you probably really want to watch the Cowboys game, but I could take it or leave it. I will probably be off in a room listening to podcasts, and you should be too. Preferably Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. Arif Hassan is editor-in-chief of Vikings Territory and a contributor to Vikings Journal and the Daily Norseman. Do you have any fun and exciting projects that you would like to plug before we adjourn for our holiday break?
Nope. I will end up looking at some point the fourth down and late game decisions of this coaching staff to see if A, they're improving at them, and B, if they suck at them. So that's in the works. I don't know when that's going to come out.
Excellent. Well, until then, we have a fun and exciting week of football. Don't forget to get your bets in by Saturday, because God love them, the Minnesota Vikings might actually win this one. And oh yeah, one last thing. Our formula is this: Christian Ponder sucks. We'll see you next week.